Wednesday,
operator would not be able
December
to
14th,
see what they're
2022.
picking, what's
Welcome
going on up
everyone.
there.
A
It's
quorum is
more
present.
challenging. This, you can see, he can
This
get it
is
spotted
what
right
I
in the exact
believe
right
will be my
spot.
last
It's a little more efficient.
rules hearing as
The work
chair, at
outside
least
and
for the
on
near
top of the
future.
Capitol
And I
restores
have
a
to
look
say
of
that it has been
elegance.
an honor
It also helps to protect
serving
the
with all of
historic
you
elements
here at
on
the
the
table.
building's inside.
And as we have it today on the screen, I've gained an incredible amount of respect for the work that we do on this committee and serving the people of Minnesota, protecting
Good
our
morning. My name is
institution
Myron Franz,
and
Commissioner of
caring for our
Minnesota
staff
Management and
and
Budget.
members.
I'm joined here today.
Senator
The
Dietrich,
state constitution requires
congratulations
Minnesota
to
to
you
have
as you
a
prepare to
balanced budget at the end of
take
each
your place
two-year
as
budget
chair
cycle.
of the Rules
A
Committee,
balanced
as well
budget
as
can be
Senate
achieved
Majority
with the
Leader.
assistance of budget
And
forecasts,
I
which
also
help
want
legislators
to
and the governor to
congratulate
monitor
Tom
revenues
Bodden,
and expenditures
for his
and to make
new
changes as
role.
necessary
I'd like
in
to
order to
thank
keep the budget
Secretary
in
Ludeman
balance.
for his many
Minnesota's
years
budget
of
operates
service,
on a two-year
not
cycle.
only to the
In an
Minnesota
odd-numbered
Senate,
year,
but to the
we
people of the
enact
state
the
of
entire
Minnesota.
budget.
So
The
thank you all.
legislature spends
Senator
a lot of
Dietrich,
time during an
just
odd-numbered session just
preparing
putting
you.
the
It's a
initial
lot of
budget
work.
in place.
But at the same time, being the Senate Majority Leader is incredibly rewarding, and I wish you the very best, and will do whatever I can to be helpful on this new journey for you. Members, today we're here to take up two committee resolutions. One is on a staff severance package items, and the other is for member housing reimbursement. We will get started with committee resolution number 1 related to extended employer contribution for insurance to Senate staff who are terminated employment with the Senate. I believe that we have an oral amendment for this resolution. Mr. Bodden, is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, yes. Just in drafting this, I omitted one important word that will make the resolution conform with the substance of the underlying provision in the benefit book. So on page 1, line 7 of the amendment, after who, insert involuntarily. And that will make it clear this benefit is available only to employees who are involuntarily separated from service with the Senate for reasons other than cause. And basically that conforms with the provision in the benefit book that makes this available in circumstances like a restructuring.
Members, any questions on the oral amendment as explained by Mr. Bodden? Seeing none, Senator Newman, would you move the oral amendment?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Senator Newman moves the oral amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion prevails and the oral amendment is adopted. Secretary Ludeman, can you give us a brief overview of what this resolution does as amended?
There, as soon as I can unmute, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your comments. And I join you. This is my last Rules Committee meeting too for my level of participation, and I certainly also join you in saying I've learned a lot and enjoyed every minute of it. Maybe not every. I enjoyed a good share of it, a great deal, and hope that we did serve the Senate. The resolution is not extraordinary. It's got precedent behind it. If this is about involuntary separations from the state Senate with the leadership change that the Senate is currently going through that will be accomplished by January 3rd. Obviously, a considerable number of staff were involuntarily separated, or you can call it a layoff. It's the same kind of language as it relates to unemployment comp or anything else. And so this is not an extraordinary benefit, so to speak. It's an extension of the Senate paid portion of their health insurance or their insurance cost that is currently being, the Senate is currently paying the employee, should they decide to continue that insurance for 6 months, would still be on the hook, so to speak, for the employee share of that insurance premium. CGIP itself, the State Employee Insurance Program, will be the one that will bill both the Senate for the Senate share and the employee for their share as well. Should the employee ever fail to pay that premium, the insurance would end. And so I think it's important to say that out loud so the employees know their obligation to continue this benefit for 6 months. It's part of what you would kind of call transition pay, transition benefit, for example, for them to get back to where they want to be for employment elsewhere. And some of the people that would not be on the list to gain this benefit are people already employed, some of them to the House of Representatives, some in private employment, and that process is actually going on as we speak. So the number of people that would be actually avail themselves of this benefit is changing virtually every day. Generally, the number of people going down, not up, as they find other employers for their insurance program, or by their choice going perhaps to a spouse benefit or something like that. So we're doing the best we can in estimating what this would be, but the main theme of it is it's the right thing to do as an employer, and it's the right thing that the private and public employers do for their employees who are involuntarily separated from employment.
Any questions for Mr. Ludeman? Seeing none, we have Senate Resolution number 1 as amended with the oral amendment. We will have Senator Weber, if you're willing to move that.
So moved.
On the resolution as amended, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Motion prevails and the resolution is adopted. Next, we have committee resolution number 2. This is related to housing lodging reimbursements for qualifying members of the Senate. I'd like to ask Secretary Ludeman to briefly explain what this resolution will do, and he will be available for any questions. Secretary Ludeman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that. The housing allowance increase, last increased late in 1916. Time for me to retire. 2016. But after carefully reviewing the housing and rental data that we have around the Twin Cities metro area, the cost of heat and utilities, which are on the rise, and also the state senators' experience with their housing experience, I am recommending that the housing allowance be increased for outstate senators from $2,000 a month to $2,200 a month. And I want to speak to, if I may, some of the research that we have done relating to that. First, I want to say that the purpose of the housing allowance is obviously and very matter of factly to allow distant legislators to live close to the Capitol on a weekly basis. Some of the people on this Zoom call are some of those senators, and maybe some of the new senators coming in to the Senate in 2023 will also be eligible for that. When we say outstate legislators, rural legislators, greater Minnesota legislators, it means legislators who live more than 50 miles away from the state capitol. And those actual numbers and that distance is certified by the senators when they are senators and put into a resolution form that the entire Senate agrees with. We do not ever make a recommendation of what is an appropriate housing arrangement for legislators seeking this near St. Paul residence. The demands or the need for senators varies a great deal based on whether they're living alone or with family members. We don't prescribe what that kind of an apartment arrangement would be. When asked by new senators, for example, my only suggestion to them is make sure you have parking that is indoors, preferably underground or first floor, or even a parking ramp, just for safety and security and weather reasons for the state Senate not to find someone unable to get to the Capitol because of any vehicle problem or a security problem. That's the only recommendation that I ever make, and it's not certainly written down in rules. Senators themselves are to seek their own residence. This is paid for by the Senate of total housing cost, both the rent, whatever utilities cost may be associated with that. Sometimes the parking is additional cost as well. And so I call that housing allowance as well. It's virtually everything related to the housing except phone and internet service, which is puts the senator on the hook for those expenses. Senator, the market is a little different because every senator finds a residence generally in the direction of their permanent residence, whether it be south, southwest, west, northwest, or northern Minnesota. There are none of them straight east of the Twin Cities, obviously, but that direction is where they start to seek. Obviously, they're partially on the way home, et cetera, or closer to their permanent residence. And so the market changes in which suburb or direction, even within St. Paul or Minneapolis, that you may find that apartment. So again, we don't prescribe, there is no Senate residence building or anything like that. So the rental market does vary across those directions. But when I look at what we've been able to learn, a good example would be from 20 to 21, the average increase for senators achieving an apartment had suffered an increase of 8.9% for that year alone. That is an average, and it does not reflect any of the increases that they may have had from 2017 or 2018 or 2019. Currently, 27 out of 29 senators eligible are receiving a housing allowance. There are some senators that prefer to drive 52 miles home every night and prefer not to have a residence closer to the Capitol. The Senate pays the least cost and those other associated costs to the senator. There are 5 senators right now who are receiving the full $2,000 a month housing allowance. There's another 5 senators that are very close to the allowance maximum, within $150 or less a month. And there are 21 senators who have experienced those increases in lease rates between 2020 and 2022 at rates between 2 and 20%. Again, that would also be depending on what kind of housing arrangement they're seeking. I'm not going to mention any senator's name. I trust and I hope that you don't either. This is about them being able to achieve a satisfactory housing arrangement while they are in session and close to the Capitol to be able to do their. But I would answer any questions about how this all works if need be, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Secretary Ludeman. And I'm aware of at least one situation of a lease increase of 43% last year in St. Paul after the rent ordinance or whatever it was passed. So that was last year, 43% increase. Senator Ress, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Secretary Ludeman. You mentioned that the housing allowance does not include a contract for a phone or internet, but we do have available to us, to members, a $200 a month allowance that is either reimbursed and non-taxable, or if you don't put in your bill, then it's $200, but it's taxable income. Did you look at all at the inflationary increases or whatever on the phone and internet connections? And was there any thought of recommending at some point an increase in that allowance? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Secretary Ludeman.
Chairman and Senator Ress, that's a great question. First of all, that communication allowance is also why we don't provide that in the housing allowance. It's separate, it's available to all senators. And the answer is no, but it should be looked at about what those costs may be, both for phone and internet, because the connection between a senator and his or her constituents is crucial. It's at least half of the job of being a senator. And so that availability for those technical resources is very important, but I have not posed the question about whether $200 is a sufficient allowance.
And Mr. Chairman, if I just might make and then another comment. Those, people can have a cell phone no matter where they are with regard to reimbursement for that. But if you're paying internet charges in 2 locations, that might be something that may be at least reviewed in the future. But clearly, why it's not, as Secretary Ludeman indicated, why it's not included in the housing allowance is because it's available as a communications allowance reimbursement. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Russ. Any other questions, members?
Mr. Chairman, if I just remind senators, if I may,
Secretary Ludeman.
that just like Senator Russ was talking about, it can be a choice of either the taxable full amount or a receivable amount. These housing issues are receivable. We need to see, the Senate sees the lease, the Senate sees the utility bills. So these are all expensed as a receivable reimbursement for the housing allowance. I wanted people to know that.
All right, seeing no further discussion, Senator Bach, would you be willing to move Senate Resolution 2?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we have Senate Resolution in front of us, Senate Resolution number 2 in front of us, moved by Senator Bach. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion prevails and the resolution is adopted.
Sure.
Members, I know this is a busy time of year for everyone. And I just want to thank you for joining us today. The agenda for the main portion of the meeting is complete, but if there are members who are on the subcommittee on committees, please stay on. We're going to have that meeting after our official rules committee meeting adjourned, so we can take up some recommended appointments. The members of the subcommittee on committees are Senators Johnson, Bach, Limmer, Dietzick, Lopez, Franzen, and myself. Does anyone have anything before we adjourn? If not, thank you again, members. We wish everyone a happy holiday season, and we'll look forward to seeing most of you here in a few weeks. The meeting is adjourned. It's like magic.
So you do have a quorum for your subcommittee now as well.
All right. And do we have everybody, or are we expecting anybody else? We're good. Okay. The subcommittee on committees, the subcommittee on committee of the committees on rules and administration will come to order. That is a mouthful. Today is December 14th, 2022, and we do have a quorum. Members, we are here today to take up several appointments, some recommended by the Republican caucus and some recommended by the DFL caucus. You should have received an email with the recommended appointments. Are there any questions or comments regarding those appointments? Senator Dietzick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So on the list that we got late yesterday, I did have 2 concerns, and there was some emails back and forth, and then I talked to and forwarded Senator Johnson an email this morning. We do have concerns that we knew that the RCAC region stuff was coming forward. We were not aware of the other items. I think most of them are okay, but the 2 that I have the biggest concerns with are related to Lessard Sams, the Ron Shera appointment. He technically, according to the Lessard Sams website, that appointment doesn't end until January 2023. So that appointment is not up yet. So I think it is potentially premature to be appointing him right now. And then the other LCCMR appointment, this one ended in December 2021. And he does continue on until it's reappointed. And so I'm just concerned that, it was brought up at this last date. I did have questions. They're under the 116P, which is the LCCMR statute. It does talk about two areas. And so the appointee is very qualified as far as experience and knowledge in the area. I do raise concerns that he has had several conflicts. There's another member on the LCCMR right now that has had multiple conflicts. And at a certain point, how many of those individual project conflicts do you have before you should actually be voting on the entire bill? And then there's another in subdivision 1A of LCCMR. It talks about the Citizen Selection Committee, and the governor appoints this trust fund Citizen Selection Committee, and that their duties are to review candidates, including those recommended by the Senate and the House and the governor, and send on recommendations. And I don't know if that was done for this candidate. I don't know how often that's been done in the past, but I know Governor Walz has used that process and set up this trust fund Citizen Selection Committee. So I was just wondering if that was done and if we should possibly remove those two appointments from this list. I'll make that motion, but I would like, to discuss it at this point.
Sure.
Discuss it.
So my understanding, Senator Dietzick, is these are both reappointments. Both of them have been serving. Mike Reese, my understanding is he has an agreement in place with LCCMR if there are any conflicts of interest that he would recuse himself. So that's an agreement between him and the LCCMR. So my recommendation is we would keep that between them, and they can decide whether or not it's a conflict of interest based on the agreement that they have. And as far as the Ron Shera reappointment goes, he is up for reappointment technically January 1st. I mean, we could have a Rules Committee hearing on January 1st, but I don't think anybody wants to do that. So that's why we added it. That's why we included it on the list today.
Can I follow up, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, Senator Dietzick, go ahead.
It technically hasn't been expired yet, and so it's a vacancy, and so it is not open. So that's why I'm questioning on if you can reappoint somebody to an appointment that is technically not open. And then I agree that Mr. Reese is currently on it and it is a reappointment. I just question on if the Citizen Selection Committee, the law isn't clear on if the citizen, he should have still been, sent, the reappointment should have been sent to this committee.
I don't have the answer to that. I don't know if his original appointment was, and I don't know if the reappointment was sent to them. I don't know if anyone on here, if anyone has the answer to that.
I don't know if Mr. Bonner does. My question is if the law states that the 7 citizen members of the commission, the citizen members must be selected and recommended to the appointing authorities according to subdivision 1, which is the Citizen Selection Committee. So I don't know if that, I will admit it isn't clear on reappointments, but the law states that it's supposed to be technically going through there. So I don't know if we're just working around that, but I just have concerns that, and I'm frustrated that we asked last week what was on this agenda. We could have had some additional conversations, but unfortunately it didn't come out until yesterday. I know that there was earlier conversations like months ago between staff members, but as a member of this subcommittee, I was not notified. I don't believe that our other members were notified. And so I just have concerns that this is being rushed through when, we could have had a more thoughtful discussion about, is Mr. Shera's appointment actually, it's not expired. And so should he be reappointed before the term is actually expired? And then the website just says January 2023. And then LCCMR, just the questions about if he was supposed to go through that policy, that procedure of the Citizen Selection Committee. And so I see Mr. Bodern is unmuted, and so I'll let him speak. Thank you.
Mr. Bodern.
So, Mr. Chairman, yeah, two separate questions here with respect to I think what is called the Governor's Trust Fund Citizen Selection Committee. The statute includes that as a requirement for appointment. It's not clear to me, and we've attempted to look to determine whether that committee met. So I guess, it's a non-answer to your question in the sense that we can't verify whether that committee met to provide a list of names for appointments. I see Senator Giesecke has her hand up, so.
I'm not trying to belabor this. I know that there was an email sent in December 2021 from a member of that select subcommittee or that selection committee to Senator Ingebrigtsen, myself, Senator Gazelka, Senator Bach, Senator Mark Johnson, Susan Kent, and Warren Limmer, saying that they are available to help, and pursuant to the statute, they can assist with identifying applicants and reviewing applicants and making recommendations. So they were available to meet and discuss pursuant to this email.
What was the date on that, Senator Giesecke?
12/22/2021. So a year ago.
Mr. Bodern, do you have, Senator Giesecke had a second question.
Mr. Chairman.
I don't recall what it was, but it looks like you do. So Senator, Mr. Bodern.
So, Mr. Chairman, the other question relates to the duration of Mr. Shera's appointment to the Lessard Sam's Outdoor Heritage Council. The statute for that appointment, which is 97A.056, sub 2, paragraph E, clause 2, basically states that these are 4-year terms and they end on the first Monday in January of the succeeding 4-year terms. So in this instance, that would be Monday, January 2nd. I would read that to mean he serves through Monday, January 2nd, and the appointment becomes vacant. The seat becomes vacant on January 3rd, which also coincides with the term of office for new senators.
Well, Mr. Bodern, there's nothing in statute that says that says we cannot reappoint them prior to the seat becoming vacant. Is that correct?
I don't know that it's worded that way, Mr. Chairman. My interpretation would be that the appointment is unavailable until the seat has become vacant.
Okay. Any other questions? Senator Giesecke, do you have a motion?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I move that we remove the Lessard Sam's and the LCCMR appointments from this list of recommendations, and that we pass first we'll remove those two from this list of recommendations.
Okay, discussion on the Giesecke motion. Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, say no.
No.
No. The motion does not prevail. Next, so we have the full list in front of us. Senator Giesecke, I have a question for you on the Council of Asian Pacific Minnesotans. There was some confusion, at least on my end, whether or not you wanted to appoint Senator Swedzinski or Senator Herr. On the list I have, it says Senator Swedzinski, but I don't know if that's the same list that was emailed yesterday.
Mr. Chair, I think that was not on the list, but my understanding is it is supposed to be Senator Swedzinski.
Okay, Senator Swedzinski. So is that on the list that members have in front of them or not?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Bodern.
So the list that has been posted includes Senator Hur's name, and you could simply provide the committee with the direction that you'll incorporate Senator Swedzinski's name where Senator Hur's name appears for purposes of adopting the list.
Okay. And we can incorporate that into the motion, Mr. Botter?
Mr. Chairman, that's correct.
So what would, can you state what the motion would be? And then we can have someone move that motion.
Mr. Chairman, I think the motion would be the subcommittee on committees recommend or make the appointments described in the list provided to members and with the substitution of Senator Swedzinski's name where Senator Hur's appears.
Okay, so we have, would someone like to move that motion? Senator Johnson, will you move that motion?
So moved.
Okay, so to the motion read by Mr. Bodern, moved by Senator Johnson. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say no. Motion prevails. All right, members, this completes the business before the subcommittee. I hope that you all enjoy some time with family and friends over the holiday season and be ready to get back to work here in a few weeks because there is a lot to do. There's a lot of work ahead of us. So the committee on committees or subcommittees, whatever committee we're in is adjourned. Have a great day, everyone.
See ya.